be willing to change strategy. Don't do it too quickly. Make sure you run the course, but be willing to pivot when you need to make the deal work.
Welcome to the On Purpose Investor podcast with your host, Eric and Tiffany Vogel. We spent several hard years building a rental property portfolio so we could have more time with our family and live our ideal life. Finding your path can be difficult, so we're here to help guide you along the way with lessons, tips, and tricks to design and implement your dream life through real estate investing. Now sit back, turn up the volume, and get ready for this episode of the On Purpose Investor. Hey Pathfinders, and welcome back to the On Purpose Investor podcast. I'm your host, Eric.
And Tiffany.
You really don't like when I do that?
It's silly. It's you, though.
It's me.
It's very you.
And that's what I try to provide our audience.
Yes.
A really authentic Eric Vogel.
Perfect.
Why would I give them a fake one?
I don't know. Why would you?
I don't know.
So you don't.
Seems like that's what you want me to give them.
No.
They need authenticity.
Okay.
And that's what I'm giving them.
All right. We'll keep giving them your authenticity.
Okay. Today's episode is number 19, our biggest sacrifice.
Yeah. We gave up a lot to be where we are. We had a clear why and roadmap and goals and all that good stuff that drove us. It pushed us to give up a lot of comforts.
Yeah, and we have mentioned it before. Dave Ramsey's to live like no one else, you got to live like no one else. And there is no truer way to do it than we probably could have dove even further into the discomfort, but we lived like no one else in our circle had been.
Yeah, I don't know how much more uncomfortable I would have wanted to go. It was pretty rough for a little bit there.
It was a span of time that kind of started in June of 2019 and ended around November.
Yeah, it was Halloween
of 2019. Right around the second week of November, I think we kind of closed this chapter of our lives. So about a half a year of insane sacrifice and living like I haven't met anyone that has done it the way we did it. And I'm sure there are people out there that have, and there are definitely going to be people that will in the future. But we can sit here today where we are with our portfolio and the things that we have and the net worth that we have built because of the sacrifice.
Yeah.
Now, when we did it, we had no clue what 3 years down the road would look like. We did not know that today we would be sitting here ready to launch a book, ready to launch a course, ready to launch a mastermind. We didn't know that was awaiting us. But what we did know is we had these big lofty goals of having these houses. We knew that we needed this cash flow to leave our jobs. And that was what drove us.
Right. Well, I think we knew we wanted time freedom to be with our family. That was our big goal. And we have our son and we have one on the way. And we pushed to have that. Once we got there, we kind of looked up and were like, well, what's next? Like, we don't want to just sit around and do nothing. So we had the freedom to decide how we wanted to spend our time. And that, I think, was the nice thing, was realizing we don't have to work for money, so we can work on the things we want to work on. So we get to sit here and record a podcast, and that's work, and it's fun.
It is fun. Now, when you say we don't have to work for money, just to clarify for some of our listeners, you do have to work for the money that you're going to use to create the money that's going to work for you. And I'll try to break that down a little simpler. You go to work, you get a paycheck. You take that paycheck and you invest it into something like what we did was real estate. Now that money has been sunken into real estate. Now that money that you invested into real estate is creating money. Now that money is used to build even more real estate. So the money that you spent is creating money for itself. And now when that snowball gets bigger, it is going to allow the money to earn money for itself. And you get to take, a piece of that pie every month. That's what we call cash flow. That's what I love about it.
Yeah.
Is that it takes that sacrifice of saying, I'm going to give up some of my money now, or I'm going to give up all of my money now, or all of my time now to let that snowball build up. And whether you're tackling debt, or whether you're building a real estate empire, or whether you're figuring out how you're becoming a stock market investor, whatever you're doing, it is going to take some type of sacrifice, whether from your time or from your paycheck or a little bit of both, or a lot of bit of both.
Right. So this story starts back in October of 2018. We decided to buy a little bumper pool camper And we took it to the high school after we bought it. You had a football game that night, and we were like rushing to get it. I don't remember if we had a trip planned or what, but we were hurrying to get it. So it sat in the parking lot of the high school while we did our football game and all that good stuff, and then drove it home. Had 6 months of great trips. It was just a plan for us to get away while we were building our portfolio and have a way to vacation that was a little bit more affordable.
Right. And I remember when we bought it, we were thinking in the mindset of, we are going to buy this one property to create cash flow enough to cover the camper note.
Right.
And I don't remember what house we bought to do that, but we did have a house that made, $200-$300 a month, and that covered our camper.
Right.
Right. So we have this toy that we get to go enjoy and make family couple memories with.
Right.
And it's covered by this rental property. And that was just such an awesome mindset thing to go through.
Right.
I don't need to budget my life to fit these toys in. I can add an asset to fit it in.
Yeah.
And once that camper's paid for, the cool thing about it is you still get money from that asset.
And the tax benefits and
it pays for your
appreciation.
toys.
There's a lot of other factors that go in there too.
Right.
So we had this little 200 square foot bumper pool.
We had a blast in it.
Yeah.
We visited so many state parks. I don't think we went to any national parks with it, but we ran a ruckus through Georgia, getting through a lot of state parks. And it was around March of 2019 that we bought a house. What are we going to call that house? It's a little bungalow.
Yeah.
It's a tiny little 2-bedroom, 1-bath house.
Right.
That was pretty close in downtown where we live. We bought that in March, and I was working on it after school here and there.
And you were leveraging a team to help you finally, instead of you just doing the work by yourself.
I had a guy that came over and sheetrocked it, and
let's talk about the walls for a second on this house.
Well, the walls were plaster at one point, and instead of repairing the plaster, the previous owners decided, I guess, it would be a great idea to just throw up OSB.
Just plywood.
Plywood walls, and then paint the plywood. So it had a unique texture.
Yeah.
Particles in the OSB, the plywood, just sticking through.
Yeah, there was
they would flake off.
Window unit leaking, which
rotting
caused mold.
Out. Yeah, there was rotting window sills that went all the way to the bottom sill plate, and there was a lot of rebuilding that had to happen.
Right.
And I had a guy that helped me, Mr. Salvador. He was great, fantastic guy. He ended up becoming a little bit of our team.
Yeah.
Yeah, me and Salvador worked on that house pretty in depth together. So we bought the house March 15th.
We got married March 23rd.
Yep.
So a week before our wedding, we closed on it.
And immediately got to work.
Right.
Our anniversary, we took our camper down to... We did a big tour.
Our honeymoon.
Yeah, our honeymoon. What did I say?
Anniversary.
Yeah, our honeymoon.
Yes.
We went down to Okefenokee, went to Jacksonville, went to Orlando, had fun at Disney World.
Yeah.
And then, brought the camper back, and I got back to work.
And I remember, so we were under contract on another property.
Mm-hmm.
And it is now our home that we live in. I remember standing in line for the teacups and getting a call from our agent about, I don't remember what, but I remember just being so frazzled and stressed that we weren't going to get this house.
Yeah.
And the plan was always to live in it for a year with an FHA loan.
Yeah.
And then move on to the next property.
Mm-hmm.
But we fell in love with it, and I've been here for a few years now. But our house was a train wreck when we bought it.
Yeah, it was a burnout. It was a full gut. Another investor came in to renovate it and do full renovation and flip it, but he either ran out of time or ran out of patience and just offloaded it. So we picked it up once it was already demoed.
Right. Just
studs in the wall and a blank slate.
Yeah.
We bought that house in May of 2019, and we had this wild idea. The summer is a hot kicking time to put your house up for a rental. It's the best time to get tenants into your homes. We have this camper. Hey, honey, why don't we move into our camper until our house is ready? We'll go bounce around state parks and hang out in state parks, and I'll drive and work on these houses. I've got a band camp that I'm helping a friend teach at in this other county, so we'll go stay down there. I have drill coming up this summer, annual training. We'll take the camper up there.
Yeah.
We're going to be very mobile anyway, and you can work from home.
Right.
So let's be a little nomadic.
Yeah.
Let's live in the camper and we'll rent our house out and we'll make a little money.
Yeah, I think the thought was saving you a lot of commuting time.
Mm-hmm.
Because your training is about an hour north of us, and then the band camps you were helping with were probably an hour south.
Yep.
So you were going to be traveling all over the state. So it's like, we might as well just pack up the dogs and go as a family, and I'll work from the camper. We set up a hotspot and...
Right. And the house that we now live in, the one that we were doing renovations on and the one that we were waiting to be done, had a barn out back. Mm-hmm. So that's where we put all of our furniture and everything. Yeah. So we didn't have to get a storage unit for all of our stuff. We just put it in that barn while the house was getting renovated. And we became a bit nomadic. We were traveling around, living in the camper.
Right.
And so in June of 2019, that's kind of when we went full time.
Yep. So we rented out our house that we were living in. Have a great tenant there. He's still there. It's a great situation. So we were able to move out, get it rented quick, and then we were bringing in the income, covering that mortgage. So I think we were paying the mortgage on our house while the renovations were happening.
Right.
So we didn't have two mortgages, which was nice.
Yeah.
Definitely made it easier.
And so during the summer, while, I'm teaching band camp and while I'm doing annual training, we go under contract for another house. And we're going to call this the race car house.
Yeah. Why do we call it the race car house?
Well, it's called the race car house because we had a tenant not too long ago move in who said, I have a race car, but I just work on it there and I take it to drag strips and I race on it. Well, it turned out he was racing down the street that the house was on, working
old windy country road,
working on the car into midnight hours and revving it up. And we're not just talking like a little street car racer. This was a super hot rod drag race car. It was stupid loud.
Yeah. So we gave him a few opportunities to remove the car from the property because it was disturbing the neighbors.
Yeah.
He chose not to. And continued drag racing, and you could see the tire marks on the road.
It didn't work out. Yeah. It wasn't the right house for him, and he wasn't the right tenant for us, and we just needed to part ways.
Yeah.
And my father-in-law calls him Race Car Willie. It's definitely not his name.
I don't know where he got that from, but
called him Race Car Willie. But that's why we call it the race car house.
Yeah.
So that summer, we go under contract.
Yep.
And I finish my AT. I finish all of my training. And there's a small period of time between I finish all of my training and we close on this house in August. So we closed August 9th of 2019 on this house. So we go travel some state parks and go travel a little bit.
Yeah.
And then August 9th, I have this awesome idea. I was like, we have land.
And it's out in the country.
That we can park this camper on. Tiffany, we're going to park this camper behind the house and we're going to work on it while we're there. And she's like, I guess that sounds good.
Well, I think what was nice was having full hookup.
Yeah.
Because some of the parks we were staying at did not have full hookup. So every 4 or 5 days, we'd have to go move the RV.
To go dump the tanks. And
yeah,
it was a bit of a hassle.
Yeah.
So about 3 or 4 days before I moved the camper up there, I went and put in a sewage pipe and whatnot. I hadn't yet got a full electrical hookup ready for it, but, that was in the plan. So I get the water and the sewer set up over there and go and take the camper over there. And we just have a big drop cord running to the camper because the house didn't have electricity at the time.
Right.
Well, it had electricity, but it wasn't upgraded yet because we did a full scope renovation.
Yeah, we tore it down to the studs.
Yep.
Everything in that house is new, pretty much, which is the same as our house.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of fun having a rental property project and our personal home project going at the same time, pretty much with the same scopes. And for our personal house, just to kind of add some clarification, we did a 203K loan, which means that the lender financed the entire renovation.
Yeah.
So we kind of wrapped it all in, but it was an FHA loan. So we had to have a general contractor because Eric's not licensed.
Mm-hmm.
So we were involved with it, but we didn't run the project. So that was really a struggle for us because we knew how to run big renovations at this point, but we weren't in control. Big struggle. But anyways, back to the race car house.
Yeah, so it was a full-on renovation. It was gutted to the studs and everything.
You added a bathroom.
We added a bathroom. Now, that same GC that did our house was the GC for a race car house as well. But our deal is he's going to pull the permits. I'm going to manage the project.
Right.
I'm going to manage it. I'm going to do it all. And he's just going to focus on our other house.
Yeah.
And so he pulled all the permits and whatnot, and I managed that renovation. We get through it, full electrical, full plumbing, added the bathroom, all that stuff. And it took us a lot less time than than it took him to do his.
Right.
And I'm not saying that I'm better or worse at being a contractor or whatnot, but I think it has a big to do when you're living out back and you kind of want it to be done.
Well, I think too, I have a project management background.
Mm-hmm.
So we used what's called a Gantt chart.
It was the first time I have ever heard of a Gantt chart.
And it made a huge difference.
Yeah.
So basically, you list down the side of a spreadsheet all of the different pieces of the renovation.
Right.
So let's say like demo, then we had like the rough in electrical, plumbing, and then you get into the finishing with sheetrock and floors and paint and things like that. And then across the top of it, you have the dates. And we would just highlight the section for each area.
And the idea is that it cascades down from top left to bottom right. I'm not going to get into every detail about it, but, demo is going to be top left. Cleaning for pictures is going to be on the very bottom right.
Right.
And all the things kind of happen in between and they cascade down.
Yeah, and what made it so helpful for us was things never run on time.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to quickly look at the chart and move things out and make sure that we were calling contractors that were scheduled for further down the line to say, hey, we need you to push out a week.
If the cabinets got installed a week sooner, I could call my granite guys and say, hey, cabinets are in, I need a template. And I could move that template up. That way the install could be moved up as well.
Right. It just helped manage the timelines really well. We found this property on the MLS. Our agent called and said, hey, here's this house. Go look at it. We bought it. It was a quick and easy.
We used private money. We had a private money partner that came out and looked at the deal. He was the same private money partner we used on our triplex before. And, this was a big gamble for him because it was a huge renovation. And he saw us do a little renovation at the triplex. And he came out to this and he's like, well, this is big. Are you sure you're going to be able to do this? I was like, oh, listen, I've got this. I can handle this. And, he funded it and we were able to move through.
Right.
And we used the proceeds from that triplex to help fund the renovation side on this. So, Tiffany, what were we all in?
So we all in were $132,000.
That was purchase price and renovation.
And closing costs on the front end and on the the refi.
Okay.
So that was literally everything we had.
So we were 132 all in. What did it refinance at?
It appraised at 151.
Okay.
So we left some cash in there.
Right.
But
hang on, why did we leave cash in it? Because we only got 75% LTV?
Right.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, it was still a solid burr.
Right.
We were happy with it.
We didn't leave our cash in it. We left the cash that the triplex made in it.
Right.
So it's not like we had to fork out, the $10,000 or $15,000 to cover the closing to make that 75% LTV.
Right.
It was the money from the triplex that made it happen.
Right.
And the money from the triplex came from just us adding insane value and us getting in a home run of a deal.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
And it appraised a lot higher because we added that bathroom.
Right.
So I think that made a huge difference because this house had this really weird dining room off the side of it, off the kitchen.
Yeah.
And we were able to just kind of reconstruct the floor plan a little bit and make it an ensuite principal bedroom.
Yeah.
So finding ways to really add value makes a big difference on getting your appraisals up.
Right. And that was an easy way to add value there because the footprint was there.
Right.
And it's what, 1,000 maybe?
1,200
Is it
square
1,200?
feet, I think.
Yeah. And it's a cozy 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It's a great starter home or, even a transition home for young kids. Our first tenants we put in there was a young lady with 4 boys. Oof. And it was a great home for them. Yeah. And they actually have moved into another home that we bought that was even bigger. It's a 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom, 2-bath.
Yeah. So each boy has their own room now, which they love. Yeah. I'm sure she loves too.
We're very grateful that she's still with us. We love her and love that her family's creating memories in our home.
Yeah. So in the middle of all of this, we're living out back of our camper. We have the dogs outside on leashes. It was a full-on redneck soiree.
And no offense to our redneck friends out there. Listen, I'm still at heart a redneck. Grew up in a small little dirt road town.
I did not. So this was probably the most redneck thing I've ever done. It was great.
By far not the most redneck thing I've ever done. By far.
It was a good time though. But so in the middle of all of this, Eric leaves for 2 weeks of training for the military.
That's right.
So this is separate from his annual training. He went away to
Virginia.
Yeah. So I was running the project on my own, working my job, taking care of the dogs.
And this was around the time we were wrapping up the project too. because there were some inspections happening.
It was rough-in, right? Because insulation was the issue.
There was rough-in and insulation inspection.
Yeah. And there was a last-minute issue with some of the insulation, and I had to figure out how to solve the issue.
You figured it out. You did good.
Yeah. Although the inspector didn't catch some of it.
Yeah.
It was just like one spot needed some extra insulation, but I didn't have the materials.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of a mess, but we figured it out.
That's right.
I remember spray foaming holes in the framing. I don't know what I was doing, but
you were fire blocking.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was doing what Eric told me to. I don't know. Right. It was a hot mess. So we
did a great job.
Thank you. We worked until 10, 11, 12 at night because home was out back and there was nothing to do in there. It was a 200 square foot camper.
Yeah. You know, getting ready to go to my training, it was a music school. And so I had to practice my tuba.
That's right.
And so I would go into this empty house and we hadn't had drywall up. We had just finished our rough-in. And I'm playing tuba in the middle of this
shell of a house.
Shell of a home, yeah. It was great.
Yeah, it was just thinking back on it, it was just so crazy.
Well, there's an even crazier moment that I don't want to forget to mention.
I feel like we need to save that for the book.
I don't know.
The memoir that's coming out.
Listen, I'm going to tell a brief synopsis.
Go ahead.
So we get the electrical rough-in done, and we get all the electrical set up. And, you know, in the meantime, we're just running off this one outlet that's running off the old electrical system. And I called my electrician. I was like, hey, can you get this roughed in one day? Because we're living out back, and I need to be able to have electricity. He's like, it might be 2 days. So I get a generator. I think I borrow a generator or whatnot. We live off a generator for like 2 or 3 days. And he comes in rough ends. We get the inspection. We get power turned on. And I needed to run a hard wire from the house to our camper instead of living off this drop cord. And, you know, in my mind, I'm like, okay, it's a 30 amp running a camper. So obviously it needs to be a 220. I go through the full hassle. I run this cable. I get it out there. I set it up. And about 11 o'clock at night, I get finished.
So for people that don't know electrical voltage and all that good stuff, you ran more power?
I ran twice as much as I should have.
Okay.
It should have been a 110, and I ran a 220.
Okay.
And so I run the wire. I get it all set up around 11 o'clock at night, and I plug it in. As soon as I plug it in, I hear some sounds from inside. And I open up the camper door. I'm like, that's a strange sound. So I open up the camper door, and there's white smoke everywhere. And the lights are out. And I immediately yell, Tiffany, get out, get out, get out.
Yeah.
And she's asleep.
Yeah, and I'm sleeping in a t-shirt, no pants.
Yep.
Had panties on, thankfully.
There you go.
And the way this house is set up, you see your neighbors. Mm-hmm. So I'm standing out in the yard at 11 o'clock at night with one of those big lights, like a safety light.
Yeah,
so
there's a security light out back.
So it's well lit. Then I'm standing there with no pants on, just like, what's going on?
The TVs in the camper are putting out white smoke. Every outlet, there's white electrical smoke everywhere. And I guess it was at that moment I realized it needs 110.
So we have no power to the camper. It doesn't work.
Yep.
And we're like, okay, it's hot. It was probably August, September in Georgia. It's hot.
Mm-hmm.
Or as our son says, hot.
Yeah.
Hot, real hot. So we had a vacancy in our triplex. And
in the studio.
Yep.
Right.
So you threw the mattress from our bed in the back.
I had a ladder rack on my truck, so I put the mattress on the ladder rack. I put all of our stuff in the bed of the truck, and we loaded up and moved into the studio part of our triplex at like midnight.
Yeah, it was for we were there for week and a half,
about 2 weeks.
Yeah,
because I had to then the next day I took the camper to an RV repair site. And they fixed it. Luckily, it was the inverter that blew up. The electrical smoke that came out of every outlet was just a little pass-through, so we didn't have to rewire the whole camper.
The only thing that got messed up was a little $15 fan from Walmart.
That's right.
So, all in all, it was not that big of a deal.
Yeah, so I bought the same fan about 10, 15 days after we figured out what had all died, and I returned the one that got damaged. You know, shame on me. I kind of did that.
You took advantage of the Walmart returns.
Unfortunately, I'm sorry, Walmart ish.
So we're living in the studio, and I have people reaching out wanting to tour it,
and we're living in it.
And I'm like, oh, we had to do some more renovations, so we'll be available for tours in 2 weeks.
Yep.
So thankfully, we had that place to go to. I mean, I guess we could have gone to a hotel, but the situation was we were so blessed in that because we had a place to go.
Yeah, we had a place to go, and going to a hotel would have been tough with our 2 dogs.
Yeah.
So, well, we move into this studio apartment in our triplex, and we finish up the renovation. And when we finally get the camper back, we're done with the reno at this point.
Yeah.
It might have been, we may have went back out there and stayed for a little. Actually,
I think we did.
We stayed out there for another month, I think.
So
while we were finishing up,
mid-September, we bought another house.
Yep.
So we bought basically August, September, and October. We bought a house, basically one after the other.
Yep.
And this house we're gonna call the ghost house.
Yep.
Because, well, we'll get to that story in a minute.
Hang on. So we wrap up race car house, pack up the camper, and move it. To the ghost house.
Right. So we found this house. It was actually the same listing agent as the race car house.
Mm-hmm.
She called our agent and said, "Hey, do you think they'd be interested in buying this other one?" And we looked at it. I remember we drove by it. We were going to Golden Corral, which I don't really know why. It was just you and me eating at Golden Corral, but we threw down on some Golden Corral that night.
Oh, yeah.
And we called our agent, or he called us and was like, "Go look at it." So we drove by, and while we were sitting in Golden Corral, I was signing the Authentisigns because he had already drawn up the offer and was ready.
Right.
And we closed on it within 3 hours, or we got it under contract within 3 hours of it being on the market. And we went to our local meetup not too long after. And had friends like, "Oh, you got that house? Like, I saw it go on the market and then it went off real quick."
Yeah.
So being able...
We felt like champions at that point. It was the first time we'd done a deal like in under a day.
Yeah.
So.
And it was the relationship with our agent, because he called us to say, "Do you want this?" And he knew we would close. He knew it was a good deal for us. And
it was also a relationship with our private money lender.
Yep.
Which he told us he was out of money, but referred us to a different private money lender. So we then started establishing a relationship with another private money lender.
And then it was also the relationship with that listing agent.
Right.
Because she knew we were good to close.
Yeah.
So just showing up and doing what you say you will do will go
Being
really
consistent,
far.
right.
Yeah.
So all in cost on this house, the ghost house.
Yes, was about $150,000.
Okay. So purchase of what was it? 126.
That sounds
130.
right. Yeah.
And then we did very light renovations here. We only put in about $15,000 in renovations here.
We spent $3,500 in renovations. We spent more on closing costs.
Oh wow. Okay.
Than we did on the reno. I don't know how, that doesn't seem right. No, I'm sorry.
It's $15,000.
It was, yes, it was.
Yep.
13. I apologize. I was looking at the wrong number.
So we're all in for $150.
It appraised at $180.
So we left a little money in the still.
And I remember feeling like we left so much cash in here.
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to keep doing it if we have to keep leaving this much money? I felt so beaten down when we got that appraisal back.
It was still money from the triplex,
right?
That was dumping into this one. It still wasn't our money,
right?
It was still money that we printed, essentially,
right?
That we created.
So this house is a 4-bedroom brick ranch, 1 floor,
2 bath,
carport. It's a great home.
It needed some cleaning up.
Yeah,
we kind of changed up the kitchen a little bit, took out some mid cabinets, and did some granite on the inside.
Took out the lime green paint.
Yeah, there was very beachy. On the inside, I remember it was very beachy.
But it was a light reno. It was more lipstick, floors, paint.
Right.
And then just demoing that one section of cabinets.
Right. And so and I had to rebuild the bathroom.
That's right.
In the back, the primary bath, because it was kind of rotten out. So I had to rebuild the floor there and put a new shower in. But otherwise, I didn't really mess with that.
Compared to the full gut we had just done, this felt like a cakewalk.
Yeah. And so we're living in our camper in the driveway. This kind of wasn't an outback thing. Yeah. And we didn't have full hookups here. But there was a functional bathroom. So when we needed to use the bathroom, we would go inside to use the bathroom. And then we would sleep and whatnot in the camper.
Yeah. Well, and I got to take a bath. Yeah. I was so happy.
There was a bath in here.
Yeah.
We were able to shower and bathe in the house.
Right.
And use the bathroom in the house.
And not wear shoes.
And there was a refrigerator in the house, so we had a full refrigerator instead of just a camper fridge.
But we didn't have any kitchen stuff. There was no stove.
There wasn't a stove,
microwave. There were no countertops, so...
The sink in the kitchen wasn't working or anything, so we had to, wash dishes in the bathroom sink.
Yeah.
So it was a little hodgepodge. It was a very unique setup.
Yeah.
So we were halfway living in the camper, halfway living in the house. And when we finally got the kitchen... No, we didn't get the kitchen counters in yet.
No. we didn't do anything in the living room.
Yeah.
And the living room had these little bifold doors.
Right.
So we could close it off. So we said, it's a fenced-in yard. The dogs can run around and not be leashed.
Right.
And we could just take the bed out of our storage shed and stay in this living room while we're renovating.
So that's what we did.
And it was probably the worst decision of that 6 months.
Yeah. What made it so bad was just the presence of what I will call, visitors in the home. And call it what you will. Believe in what you will.
Eric's not one to believe in ghosts or demons or anything like that.
Before this house, I 100% did not believe in visitors in the other world. So we move into the living room. We get the bed set up. We get a little table set up. We get a TV in there. And in the back room of this house, there was an old chair. Like an old little rocking chair. Had like Route 66 designs on it. I thought it was the coolest chair ever.
You should take a picture of it and put it in the show notes.
Oh, yeah. So this chair is, for some reason, still in our possession.
Yes, I don't know why.
We're in our podcast recording studio right now, which is the upstairs of our barn. And there's some storage on the outside of the recording studio. And the chair's out there.
You wanted to bring it in the house, and I said, absolutely not. It's not
the chair has never made it in our house, but it's still here.
Yeah.
I kind of am paying homage to whoever sits in that chair. Otherworldly people
that
are sitting in that chair.
So you find the chair.
So I find the chair, and I put it into the living room so I could
What'd you find next to the chair?
Well, hang on. So I moved this chair into the living room so it could be where I sit. Because otherwise, we were just sitting in the bed.
Yeah.
And that's not very cozy for just long periods of sitting. So that was my chair. But what Tiffany was alluring to is in that back room where I found this chair was a picture on the windowsill. And I was like, oh, there's a nice picture on the windowsill. And it was a picture of this young lady or whatever.
It was a school picture.
It was a school picture.
Like elementary school.
And I pull the picture off, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, oh, that's really sweet. I wish we could find who owned this and get it back to them. Well, behind that picture was a cross that was hung upside down in the window. And I didn't read a lot into what upside down crosses meant and all that, but I figured it wasn't good. And I didn't really pay much attention to it. I just, took the cross down, just laid it down on the windowsill. Yeah, that night, or it was a couple nights later. It
was a few nights later, yeah.
We're laying in bed, we're asleep.
Well, let me just add, I was having a really hard time sleeping and just was not in a good mental health space in general. I don't know. I was just really struggling.
Yeah.
And I was finally asleep.
Mm-hmm.
Like taking sleeping pills and still cannot sleep. It was rough.
So one night I have a nightmare, and it is an awful nightmare. And, it's like I'm being visited in my dreams by very bad energy. And just, I'm not into this type of stuff, but for whatever reason, that night I was visited in my dreams.
You were chased in your dream.
I was being chased.
Something otherworldly.
Yeah. And I wake up in a sweat, and I'm sweating, and I'm terrified. I think I even screamed in my sleep.
Yeah, you did.
And I think
you were running, too. Like,
possibly.
You were thrashing.
And I wake up, and our big dog is laying on the floor, sleeping. Maggie, our little dog, is laying in the bed next to me. She always sleeps in the bed. And I look over, and the rocking chair is rocking violently. Like someone is in that chair. And Tiffany wakes up. She's like, what's going on? What's going on? I was like, the rocking chair's rocking. It was so crazy. And she said, well, was Maggie in it?
Because she sometimes would jump up there.
Uh-huh. And I wanted to make sure Tiffany could go back to sleep. And I said, yeah, I think she just jumped out of it. But I knew.
She was nowhere near
that she was never in that chair. And that chair was just rocking.
Yeah.
It wasn't long after that we decided we're going to move that chair out of that room and into like a little storage barn of the property. So we moved that chair out of there.
And we made it through. And our house was finishing up. So
yeah.
Whew. I just remember not just that, but like going to the bathroom in the middle of the night. We didn't have floors. So you're walking on plywood.
Yep.
Hoping you don't get a splinter. Like it was a rough time. And whether you believe in all that or not, there was bad mojo in the house. And just, we took a dip mentally, made it through. And we basically, while we were wrapping up the renovation there, we started working on the next house.
That's right. So the next house we call the Corona house. Obviously, we bought it before COVID happened.
Right.
But we call it the Corona house because it is the house that we were most affected by Corona and someone not paying.
Yeah.
Just to kind of recap, we moved into the camper June. We do all of our summer stuff with my military and band camps and going to Army schools. And then in August, we move out back at the race car house. And then in September, we move to the ghost house.
Yeah.
And then October, we park the camper. Are we still living?
No, we stayed there till we moved into our house.
That's right. So
we moved into our house right at Halloween.
So October 4th of 2019, we're living in the ghost house.
Yeah, dealing with all that.
And starting the renovation on the next house.
Right.
So we have 2 going on simultaneously.
Yeah.
Well, 3 if you count the house that was happening for us. So we're living in the ghost house. We started renovation on the Corona house.
Yeah. And this one, we found it on the MLS also.
Mm-hmm. All in, what were we?
So about 86,000.
We bought it for about 60.
Yep.
And we put in 20 something.
Yeah, and with closing costs on the front and back end, and it appraised about 100. So we left some cash in again, but not tons.
So I think that was the last house that ate up the rest of the equity that came out of the triplex.
Yeah.
So that triplex equity
bought these 3 houses.
Bought these 3 houses.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just so you know, there's never better time to start investing than right now.
Yeah.
Just you got to start.
Right.
In order to experience things, you have to start.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about the overall impact.
Gotcha.
So this house, it was in good shape. It was the best house in the worst neighborhood. This is where our goals kind of bit us in the butt just a little bit because we had our goals listed out and it was we needed to buy 1 a month, and that's what we did. And we made it happen. And hindsight, I don't know. Hindsight, it is a good house. At the time, though, it was kind of like, did we just mess up?
Well, Monday quarterbacking it right now, I'm so glad we bought
Oh,
that house.
right. Because we were able, I think the beauty of real estate is you can pivot.
Mm-hmm.
After the first year we had it rented out, literally was, I think January is when we finally rented it.
That's right.
And we broke even that year. On that first year
we didn't make any money
because our tenant couldn't pay with COVID, and we negotiated just to get enough to make sure we could cover the note,
just so we didn't lose that year.
So we broke even.
Even in all of 2020. That house just broke.
Yeah.
Even.
So we pivoted, and we'll talk about that in a couple episodes. But be willing to change strategy. Don't do it too quickly. Make sure you run the course, but be willing to pivot when you need to make the deal work.
Mm-hmm. Corona house.
Yeah.
All of the floors were sagging.
Aggressively.
Very, very aggressively. So we ended up taking out all of the floors, all of the floor joists. We ended up rebuilding the entire floor structure throughout the whole house. And
you found a dead cat or something under the house.
Yeah, I thought we had found a dead dog underneath the house, but then it turned out to be a raccoon head.
But you thought it was a baby or something.
I thought it was a human skull. I even contacted the authorities and sent them pictures of the skull. It was so decomposed it was really difficult to tell. But when we took those floors up, it was a very shallow crawl space, so crawling under there was, very difficult. But I thought it was a human, and authorities helped me to clarify it's not, that this is an animal, and I was like, thank God.
What a weird time of our life.
Yeah. Oh, boy. So we replaced all the floors throughout the house, and then we painted it and did patchwork and new floors.
Yeah, it wasn't a huge change to bathrooms or kitchen or anything like that, so...
Yeah.
But
I remember after we closed on it, we had done a few little demo things throughout the house. We knew
there were no floors.
Well, yeah,
there was no subfloor.
That's right. So there were joists. There were joists hanging up, and some of the demo had been done in the bathroom. And I was just going through looking at the demo that had been done by a contractor we had hired.
What time of day was this?
This was after we had gotten margaritas at our favorite Mexican restaurant.
And it was like 8, 9 o'clock, and think about it, it's October, so in the South it gets dark at 5 o'clock. So. It was pitch black outside.
Yeah. So I'm going through and I'm just looking at the house that had been demoed. There were a few overhead lights that were working.
There was a spot in the floor right when you walked in that there was flooring.
Yeah.
So you could stand.
Yeah,
but
I asked them to put a piece of plywood down there so that you could stand to
just
see
come
things.
in. Yeah. So I was standing there. You tiptoed into the bathroom and was looking at it.
And I was just looking at some of the plumbing, seeing what we were going to have to do to create, a tub shower combo, because there was a window in the bath and we had to fix all that. But I just touch one of the pieces of plumbing. And if you don't know anything about CPVC, is that when it gets old, it gets fragile, it gets brittle. and you could just touch it and it'll explode. And that's exactly what happened. I touched it, and boom, water starts shooting out into the wall, and water's just spewing.
And
there's no
tools.
floors, and there's no floors in the house, so the crawl space is just starting to flood. We didn't have any tools with us. We just went to dinner.
And you had just happened to clean out your truck.
Yeah. And so had no tools with us, and so I'm running outside. I had not located the water meter at this point, which, in hindsight, every time you buy a property, go flag, get a little, 80-cent flag, and flag your water meter. Know where it is.
And have a water key or a screwdriver or something on hand.
To turn. So we run outside. It's the middle of the night. Best house in the worst neighborhood. And Tiffany's running around. She runs up to one of the neighbors' house.
There were a bunch of people outside, so I was like,
it was like a block party.
Yeah.
And she runs up.
I'm just like, hey, does anyone have a screwdriver? And I'm panicked. Like, I don't know what else to do. I'm just trying to help. Well, and they looked at me like I had a horn. Like, it was so funny. They're like, no. And then this guy just starts following us around, telling us how we should rent the house out and all this stuff, and would not leave us alone. And we're like, dude, we're just trying to get water to stop flooding our house. Yeah. Like.
And I don't know how I got the water turned off. I think I just reached in there and...
You found something in your truck, I think,
I Bear Gryllised it, and I just grabbed that water valve and I shut it off with brute strength.
And then we laughed, because it was, at this point, it's just like, what else? What else?
Yeah, what else? And so we turned the water off, packed up, and went back to the ghost house to sleep for the night.
Right. At least we had margaritas.
Yeah.
That made it a little better.
So August, September, October, 3 houses... An insane amount of experiences that we went through.
And this one was a third private money lender. Yeah. So they funded the purchase, we funded the renovations,
right? And
then we did a refi on it.
We burred all 3 houses. Yeah. We left money in all 3, so it wasn't like it was a true burr where we could pull all of our cash out, but the money we left in it was money that was from our first burr, which was the ultimate burr for us. So we had no money left in all 3 houses.
Right.
But going through all 3 of these houses, there was just so much sacrifice. Yeah. We gave up every last bit of comfort. We could have easily stayed in our house and come home to the same comfortable, air-conditioned, full bath house and
kitchen, and like having a full kitchen
and have been in a very comfortable situation. Yeah. But we decided we want to expedite this. We want to get there faster. And we want to be able to just get it done as quickly and efficiently as possible. So we're going to sacrifice everything.
Yeah.
And we did.
I think coming off our first property where you were sleeping there, it was kind of like, well, why not travel to where we need to be? That way you're not having to sleep on a couch somewhere.
And just to let you know, I had left my job teaching before this happened. So in May of 2019, that's when I left teaching. And June is kind of when we went full-time in the RV. So that was my full-time job, was working on these houses. And that's what I did.
And we were newlyweds. Mm-hmm. So we
had just got married.
Starting a business, being married.
Buying houses, renovating houses. It was a mess. But, it was that sacrificing everything that was comfortable to us to achieve what we have today.
Right. And we were so tired, we didn't have time to worry about really anything.
Yeah. We couldn't really be mad at each other.
Right.
Because we were just so tired.
Right.
We couldn't go through those newlywed things of figuring out how to live together because we were just figuring out how to survive together.
Right.
Over these 3 houses, at the time in 2019.
So once we were done with all the renovations, the refis, all that good stuff.
We added how much to our net worth?
About $60,000.
So about $60,000 was added to our net worth, and cash flow from these 3 houses was probably around $1,000 a month that we generated. Is that being generous?
I think that's too high. Okay. I think it was more like $150 to $200 a house.
Okay, so $600 at most. That we added to our cash flow from these 3 houses. So those 4 months of crazy just sacrifice, we added $60,000 to our net worth and $600 a month in cash flow. And at the time, while you're in it, you might think, wow, was that really worth just $600 a month and $60,000 in net worth for what we just went through?
Yeah.
But when you look at it from today, those 3 houses have added a net worth of a total of about $320,000.
Yeah. So basically, because house values have gone up so much since 2019.
Yeah. $350,000 added to our net worth. from those 4 months of crazy sacrifice.
Yeah.
I would not do it any different.
Right.
I may not have moved into the ghost house.
Yeah.
We may not have moved into the ghost house. If we could go back and do it all again.
Yeah.
We probably would have just taken the camper to a state park.
Yeah.
And just stayed in a state park.
Right.
I think that would have made it a little bit better.
Yeah.
But I would not have changed anything about living in the camper.
No.
Because we did. We went without.
Yeah.
We went without a lot.
Right.
We sacrificed our health a little bit because we were just eating whatever we could, whenever we could. We just focused.
Right.
We went heads down.
I remember I was still walking a lot. So when we were at the race car house, I was walking those little country roads.
Yeah.
Listening to Bigger Pockets and other real estate podcasts, just constantly still educating, and we were still going to our meetup. So everything we've talked about on this season so far, we were continuing to do in this season.
Right.
And honestly, I think it helped build our community because we talked about living in our RV, but once we started doing it, and when our private money lender came over to the house
and he saw our camper out back, he's like, wow. Yeah, y'all were actually doing it.
Yeah, I don't think he believed that we were serious.
It created a bit of clout, maybe,
credibility
for us, and credibility for us, because when we would go to our real estate meetup, we weren't just those newbie investors that are trying to find a deal here and there. We were those crazy young investors that are literally going all in.
Right.
And that's something you'll find out in the book that we wrote, the chapter called Going All In. It's just about insane sacrifice.
Yeah.
And just, making sure that your goal and your why is so big that you're willing to live like no one else so that you can live like no one else.
Well, and I want to add, not everyone can do this level of sacrifice. Your spouse might not be on board. You might have kids. Your situation is different.
We could not do what we did with a 1-year-old.
No, it would not be fun.
It would look a lot different.
Right. But what I wanted to say is, do what you can and are willing to give up. Mm-hmm. And at the very least, just show up consistently to your meetup.
That's right.
Because people will be willing to help you if you can help yourself and be consistent and show up. And I know people have reached out to us for help and advice, and if they're not willing to put in the work to read a few books or show up to the meetings or things like that, it's really hard for us to invest our time in helping them.
Right. Because we sacrifice so much, I think our expectation is that if you want our help, we're going to have to see that you're at least willing to sacrifice something.
Right. And it might just be one night a month.
Your time to read a book, your time to go to a meetup, your time to attend a class, a seminar, a webinar, something free.
Right.
Your time to just listen to a podcast and tell me what you learned.
Yeah.
Because in the book, also talk about saying, hey, I want to pick your brain, and how it is kind of offensive in a way that I see it of, I want to get something from you by giving you nothing.
Right. And giving myself nothing.
Right.
Just investing in yourself is huge.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to say is, our net worth grew significantly over the past few years on these houses because part of it, the housing market has just skyrocketed.
What we have seen in the past year and a half in the housing market is what you traditionally see over a 10-year period.
Right.
Right.
So I guess the point of giving you those numbers is to say real estate takes time. We got lucky, we're blessed, we're fortunate, I don't know how you want to put it, but by getting in when we did helped us kind of launch our net worth a little bit faster because of the way the market's been. And we don't know what the market's going to do, so we don't count on that.
You don't know if it's going to keep doing what it's doing.
Right.
Worst case scenario, it doesn't. And you grow just a little bit, and in 10 years, you'll have that growth.
Right.
I guess you'll never have that growth if you never get started.
Right. And even though prices are high right now, in 10 years, they will still grow. Mm-hmm. Because real estate is a tangible asset. Inflation's going to continue going. And yes, prices are high. But if you can find a good deal that cash flows well and can handle a market correction, so let's say 20% reduction in rent and 20% reduction in value.
Yeah.
If you can weather that and keep the property through the downturn that may or may not be coming,
yep,
you will have a solid asset in time.
That's right.
So even though the market's high, I would still buy. If you can find a deal, don't just buy anything just for the sake of buying it, and make sure the numbers work. But I guess my point is, don't just say, oh, the market's too high and walk away and not invest in trying to find something that works. We still have bought in this market.
Mm-hmm. We bought a house in January.
Yeah.
Right. There are deals to be found. There are deals to be had.
Right.
The best deals are obviously going to be at the kitchen table by, reaching out to people and going door to door and meeting people and finding them before they put it on the market.
Right.
The best person to find that teaches you how to do this is Bill Cook. So if you're interested in figuring out how to find off-market deals and figuring out how to structure deals that are home runs and big wins for the seller and you, go check out Bill Cook's material at billandkimcook.com. Other than that, sacrifice, man, it's huge. We would not be where we are today if we did not sacrifice.
Well, and we wouldn't appreciate where we are today.
No,
I remember when we moved into our house, we were like, the ceilings are just so big, which we have tall ceilings, but just being in a room that was bigger than our camper, the entire camper, it was nice.
It was very nice. It puts a perspective in your mind of it could be worse. You're choosing to give up things in order to have things that you may otherwise not have had.
But what can you sacrifice? Could you house hack for a year?
Yeah.
So you can get an FHA loan at a lower rate.
Could you give up your Saturday mornings doing nothing and go drive around neighborhoods and find the houses that are worn down and beat up and send them mailers or go knock on their door or find out who owns it and send them a letter?
Find the sacrifice that works for you and that you're willing to do and your family's willing to do and do it because it'll make all the difference.
Yeah. The biggest thing about it is you'll get nothing if you do nothing.
Yeah.
You can't expect something from nothing. You can't get blood from a turnip.
All right.
Is what I've been told. All right, let's close this
Your
up.
Southern is showing.
Yeah, let's close this one out.
Thanks, y'all, for hanging out with us and listening to us talk about our season of sacrifice and the lessons we learned. What lessons can you take from our experience and apply to your life? Don't let the time you just invested go to waste. You only get one life, so live it purposefully. That's all we have for you today. See you next time.
Are you ready to discover and build your dream life? Then it's time to become a Pathfinder. Head over to onpurposeinvestor.com and sign up for our newsletter to get tips and tricks to help you find your path and get the latest from our blog. If you haven't already, we'd really appreciate an honest review on your favorite podcast app. If you're enjoying this show, share it with friends, family, and fellow investors. See you next time at the On Purpose Investor Podcast.